Okay, everyone, this is Megan Tech with ACTE, Director of Student Awards. I'd like to remind everyone to mute their phones. Any background noise at all can sound minimal on your end, but be disruptive on our end. So please make sure you mute your phones unless you have a question. Before we get started with our presentations for today, I just wanted to remind everyone of two upcoming events. We have our next virtual discussion on October 24th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Elaine Webb will be conducting that presentation. We hope you all can join it. The other item I wanted to remind everyone about was the EIA reception, which is held at Vision on December 4th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. I'll be sending out the invitation materials in the next few days. And this are doing trying to do an RSVP list to ensure we have enough room for everybody. So please just take 2 seconds to respond to that invitation. Other than that, I believe we will get going today. I'm happy to introduce our presenters today, are Candice, Mott, and Najmah Ahmad. Najmah has been working in education and youth development for 12
Hold on a minute.
Someone mute their line. I think I can do it.
We had an FFA Enrichment Center contract for 617.
That was the.
Okay, sorry about that. So Najmah, she has been working in education and youth development for 12 years. This includes experiences at institutes of higher education, nonprofit organizations, and at the K-12 district level. Currently, she serves as the program director of the Career Readiness initiative at CCSSO, developing a national career readiness agenda to ensure that all students have access to high-quality career readiness opportunities that bridge the gap to jobs for the future. Candice is a native Memphian and has lived in DC for 7 years. She is career CTE educator for 12 years and is currently working for DC's Office of the State Superintendent of Education. Candice is the mother to a 12-year-old daughter named Jamison, and they love great food and scary movies. So welcome to the both of you. We are so glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Megan.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, everyone. Again, this is Candice, Mott, and Najmah Ahmad, and we are here to talk about work-based learning programs. And so the title of our presentation today is Successful CTE Programs Include Dynamic Work-Based Learning Systems. Oh, can I move it? Oh, here we go. And again, I'm Candice Mott. I work for the DC Office of the State Superintendent of Education, where I focus on working with creating programs of study for DC students all across the city. And then we have Najmah Ahmad, who had such a great introduction. Hold on, I went backwards. Here we go. And she works for the Council of Chief State School Officers. And so our agenda today, we're going to focus on talking about a brief introduction of work-based learning. We will then look at a continuum of work-based learning systems, look at school-level support of work-based learning, and then move to local and state education agency support of work-based learning. And then how do we measure quality work-based learning examples? And then hopefully end with a great Q&A session on the successes and challenges within, the work-based learning systems. So the introduction to work-based learning. So work-based learning, there's a formal definition of work-based learning that I think is important for us to understand, especially as we move into Perkins 5, in which it explicitly, states what work-based learning is. So these are sustained interactions with industry or community professionals in real workplace settings, to the extent practicable, or simulated environments at an educational institution that foster in-depth, first-hand engagement with the tasks required in a given career field. that are aligned to curriculum and instruction. So again, this is the formal definition of work-based learning, and it provides guidance on how work-based learning should look. Keywords here are sustained. So this is something that is ongoing. It's not one-off opportunities that we provide our students. And they can also be actually in practice in the setting or simulated environments. And so that's something to also consider as well as we move forth with understanding how to implement work-based learning. And the final part of this is the fact that they are aligned to the curriculum and instruction, so that they aren't these one-off experiences that may not enhance instruction, because the point of work-based learning is to support the instruction that is going on within our CTE programs. So why work-based learning? So when we talk about work-based learning, we are looking at things like employability skills, exposure, experience, education, and economics. A few of these are really important to me and can be very important to you all as we look at, for instance, why should we do work-based learning? When we talk about economics, for example, students make higher incomes than their peers from work-based learning in later grades. These are opportunities, especially if they gain work experience that they can put on their resumes or attend, participate in programs that can enhance their resumes. They are already going to be ahead of their peers, and they're able to make more money and have more meaningful experiences down the line. The experiences that we provide our students, it teaches our students about high-wage, high-skilled, and in-demand fields, unlike what we can actually do in the classroom. And I think a lot of these other ones we kind of already know, like employability skills in education. But if you also look at education, I really like the long-term one, where we looked at data and saw that with work-based learning, it increases attendance to post-secondary institutions and the completion for our students, which is important as well, as we don't want to just do things for the moment in time that we have our students, but for the duration, especially at the K-12 level. So there are different types of work-based learning. I'm not going to read these verbatim, but I was really impressed with this list. And I also put a lot of our resources on the last slide, so you can go back and actually get the resources. We have apprenticeships, which I think we have talked about with data and within our cities, that apprenticeships, we have them available. We have the registered apprenticeship program, but we also have youth apprenticeships that are possibly available through other programs within our cities for students that are 16, often 16 or older, or high school students. The bigger part of this is the fact that these are opportunities for students to gain skills while they're actually getting paid, which for some of our students is a very important piece, because sometimes they have to make a choice between learning and gaining skills and making a paycheck. So apprenticeships are a sometimes underutilized space, but a great space for our students to get those work-based learning experiences. We often know about internships, which can be paid or unpaid. We have cooperative work experiences or co-ops. And the difference between the two of these is usually the fact that often they're usually one is usually supervised by the school. You have like an early release, or it's a class, a formalized arrangement, whereas an internship can be a isolated program that doesn't have anything to do with the school, but it's still a work-based learning opportunity that a lot of our kids participate in. And of course, often we have internships that are well past the age of 18. And some colleges or post-secondary institutions offer co-op experiences as well as a class. We have practicums. I know here in DC, since we developed our programs of study, we have added in a practicum course so that students will participate in a practicum in their senior year. But students can also have a practicum course as early as 10th grade. In some states and some school districts, they offer this early as, because it's an opportunity for the students to all the time do like a project-based learning space. So sometimes they go to work, they do clinicals and different things like that, but they also have a project that they have to have a deliverable on by the end of the course. So practicums are a very useful space for teaching and learning, and the work-based learning part as well. We have job shadowing, which you can do as early as middle school. Mentorships are considered work-based learning as well. And you know, a mentorship can encompass a lot of these different opportunities. I'm sorry, I got a new computer and it's a little sensitive right now. So sorry for going back and forth. But a mentorship is a very great tool to have, because they can support the job shadowing, they can support the practicum, they can support internships or apprenticeships, depending on who the mentor is. So this is a great opportunity as well for students to have someone that guides to support them with their career, service, motivational. It can be an informal or formal relationship. Also, it can be something that is face-to-face or remote, which gives the opportunity for students to meet people in other places outside of their normal realms of, industry within their cities. We have work and educational site visits, which this is actually one that, from my experience when I was working at the working as a college career coordinator, we actually did a lot. We did a lot of work site visits and educational site visits. How we would do our work-based learning educational site visits, we would do a college tour, for example, but we would often go to the departments of the content area that we focused in. So we were an IT program, so we would often go to the computer science or the digital media departments at a school, and we would have the kids, still do part of the college tour, but ultimately go to those departments to actually learn real skills. They might do an actual activity with those at their university, work on a project. I know we went to the University of Delaware, and the students in the engineering program did water filters. So it was a great opportunity to kind of bridge the two spaces. Your community college is a great place. We've done those as well. And then any other post-secondary institutions that you have in your city are a great space for work and educational site visits. Our CTSOs, our career and technical student organizations, are also a great space for work-based learning. And so it kind of kills two birds with one stone. Of course, their clubs and their extracurricular, co-curricular organizations, but they do foster leadership and employability skills. And so as the kids work on projects, you can loop in a person from industry to support the students with their projects. I've taken students on site visits that support the different competition projects that they're working on. All those different types of things are still work-based learning. And you can actually combine a lot of that under a CTSO. And of course, we have guest speakers, which is something that a lot of us already do. But the great thing about this, and which I'll talk about a little bit later, is how to best prepare and utilize the opportunities of having a guest speaker.
I'm here. I mean, you could start here and then.
The last types of work-based learning opportunities we can talk about are like service learning and volunteer service, which are two different spaces as well. I know we sometimes use those interchangeably, but often a service learning is a project. Like my students did a project called the World Smart STEM Challenge, where they worked with a school in Ghana to solve a real world solution on water quality. And so the students created water filters. They did a report that they presented to the EPA and other agencies on water quality. So a great opportunity to combine the needs of our community and a work-based learning space for our students as well. And then we have virtual work-based learning, again, where we have different platforms. Like Naviance has career opportunities in there, NetPress, virtual job shadow. We have quite a few different platforms. I'm sure a lot of school systems already use, but these are great ways also to track and to provide opportunities. And the great thing about a lot of our virtual platforms, like I said, because we work-based learning is a mandatory space, especially under Perkins, it's a great opportunity to use virtual platforms to say, hey, that our students did so many hours or had so many interactions with certain career opportunities for work-based learning. And so it's also it's a great space to expand work-based learning as you can take it global. Because, you know, I don't know if you all, I didn't go to Japan or anywhere to learn about work as a teenager, but now we had the opportunity to possibly connect with a, you know, IT firm in Asia somewhere to talk about the different careers that they have available with certain companies in other places. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Najmah.
Thanks, Candice. That was a great foundation and understanding of what we're talking about. Excited to join this webinar this afternoon. Before I jump in, I would actually love it if you all feel so inclined in the chat box, if you could type in what brought you to this webinar and maybe what's one thing that you were hoping to learn or gain. When I do these things, I know sometimes we throw a lot of information at you, and I want to make sure that we're actually speaking to things that matter to you and that you'll be able to find useful and to take away. So feel free as I'm talking and then as Candice is talking, if you can answer those one or two things. What brought you to this webinar? What piqued your interest? And then perhaps what's maybe one or two things that you are hoping to learn that you can take away. But Candice, you can go ahead and go, well, actually, wait one second. So wanted to give a little bit of framing. What Candice was talking about and giving that foundation for us, like I said, was critical to understanding exactly what it is we're talking about, right? But what I want to talk about next is the continuum in the system of work-based learning. What we found, and in particular, I know in my introduction, you heard that I have kind of seen all sides of the education landscape when it comes to student development and readiness for young people. And my time at DC Public Schools, we were able to really think about how do we move from having sort of random acts of career readiness going on to a real cohesive system. And that was for a number of reasons, but mainly it's for equity. And we wanted to make sure that no matter what school a student was at, no matter what neighborhood they were in, no matter what career education pathway they chose, that they had the opportunity to synthesize what they're learning in the classroom in real world experiences. As Candice said, we know that serves to enhance the opportunity, it increases outcomes, and then even beyond that, it is a critical lever when you're thinking about school improvement and issues around absenteeism. When we created these opportunities at DCPS, students knew if I don't go to school today, I can't go to my internship this afternoon and I can't get paid. So this is beyond just, you know, extracurricular activities. This is about a cohesive educational system. And that's why I wanted to start off or take it from where Candice was talking about and start off talking about what this system actually looks like. So we're not just talking about, like I said, those random acts of career readiness. So the next slide, please. As we're thinking about how do you make sure that what we're doing makes sense and has a purpose and has a meaning, I wanted to share from the Department of Education as it relates to the Perkins legislation, what career readiness, what that continuum should and can look like. And so starting off, definitely needs to be, all work-based learning experiences need to be aligned with what students are learning in the classroom. And thinking about how can you make sure that we're being intentional and purposeful about that. And some ways to do that is partnerships with industry, which I'll talk more about, and how the LEA and SEA can really support with that, but understanding what the industry demands are and what skills are needed for students to attain. So when you're setting up these internships or continuous job shadowing experiences for students, making sure that it is being responsive to industry market data and labor market needs. And then going from there, that second green bucket, the application of academic, technical, and employability skills in a work setting. So Candice touched a bit on employability skills in her introduction. We can teach students, and many of you probably know this, we can teach students technical skills all day, and we can have the robust curriculum that's tied to industry market data. But if students aren't understanding those quote unquote soft skills or those employability skills that once you get the job, how do you actually keep it, then all of this is somewhat for naught. So with this work-based learning and this bucket of the continuum allows for us to do is to make sure that we're not only creating the opportunities that are linked to the classroom, but we're actually preparing the students with the skills that they need. So that communication, problem solving, understanding, you know, what is project-based learning and how do you manage your time to complete things that you need to get done to the minimum of professional dress. Those things are critical when thinking about work-based learning. What we did at DCPS when I was there, we were able to develop the Tenacity Employability Skills Curriculum, which is available to open source document on dcpsinternships.org. And with that curriculum, we were able to, every single student that was going into an internship or an apprenticeship, they had to go through the Tenacity Employability Skills Curriculum. And at that point, it was about I think a 13 to 17 module training. But I know that since I've gone, and I'm so happy to see that it's still holding on strong, that it's been able to grow into a full class. So that commitment is there to making sure that students actually have the training that they need there to be successful. And then that third bucket that you see there is allowing students to reflect on their learning and process the experience. I think sometimes we move too quickly from one experience to the next, and we don't pause and allow space for us to ask students, well, how do you think that went? How do you think, you know, you were able to take what you learned from the classroom? And that reflection piece is critical at all stages in this cycle, to check in with students, to get that feedback, to do targeted assessments, to make sure that they're processing the information and that they're not, you know, going through the motions, so to speak, that this is something that every step of the way that they're pausing to reflect to make sure that they're understanding and synthesizing that information. And then the last bucket, as you see, and Candice spoke about, support from classroom or workplace mentors is critical. Having those employer partnerships, having those employer champions that understand what it means to support students in a work-based learning phase. And I'll talk about how the LEA and the SEA can really support to make sure that your employer partners have an understanding of where students are and they have the ability to meet them where they are. Sometimes employers are very much well-meaning and want to support students, and they hire them for internships, and then they expect them to have the same skill set and mindset of a person that has been working for them or has been working, you know, for 2 to 5 years and have a bachelor's degree. And so it's very important that you're preparing those employers prior to these work-based learning experiences, so it's a much more pleasant experience all around. And then also so you retain those partnerships. We were able to recruit over 200 industry partners when I was with DCPS, because we made sure that we put the work in on the front end so that employers really knew what to expect. You still don't know until you get into the space for a lot of the employers. So there were still issues, but we also made sure, and Candice was great at this, that we had staff in the schools that were available to troubleshoot any issues or answer any questions or, just really do that conflict resolution piece for the employers. So they were supported throughout this whole process. You can go to the next slide. And so this is an example that I just wanted to provide for you all so you can see what this continuum actually looks like. So this is something I created at DC Public Schools when we were there, and it takes what Candice was talking about and really lays out the spectrum and the continuum and what should be happening when. So at the very beginning, you have kind of those lighter touches, right? When you're getting students ready and they're just now, this may be their first foray into work-based learning. You want to start off with a more kind of low risk opportunity, but still very impactful. So starting off with those guest speakers, then progressing into industry panels, coming in where you're preparing students, having them create questions ahead of time as it relates back to the curriculum. Some of the activities we did, for instance, with the engineering academies and IT academies, we partnered with NASA, and they were able to do virtual industry panels with the students. We also did in-person trips to the Goddard Space Center, but starting off, we wanted to make sure that the students got the most out of the experience. So at the beginning of the year, they started off with the lighter touches of those virtual opportunities and then progressed into the in-person. This is also, as I always go back to equity, for students in rural communities that may not have a high level of industry. It is not an excuse, and we fail our students if we try to say, we don't have industry here, so we can't do work-based learning. That's not true. It's 2019, and technology is wonderful, and so that's how you can really lean in if you're thinking about how do I provide robust work-based learning opportunities for my students. Those virtual opportunities, those guest speakers that can Skype in, that's a great way to get those students involved too. And I see all of your questions here, and I'll definitely respond to them as we're going on, and we'll leave time at the end. But thank you all for being engaged there. Then going into site visits, getting students out of the classroom, of course, and Candice will talk about what does that look like at the school level. Students go to school and to go to class. So having to definitely be mindful about how many times you're getting students out and being very strategic about that. But if you have a strong ecosystem in the school and everyone is on the same page and understanding, again, that this isn't just like a bucket that lives in the CTE universe, but this is an opportunity, for English teachers to get engaged and have their students write a paper or an essay about something they saw on their site visit and tie that back into the curriculum throughout the school, not just in the CTE space. Like I said, it makes it much easier to get students out of the classroom for those work-based learning opportunities. And then to the larger touch, which would be those summer internships or apprenticeships where students are actually working and getting paid. I know internships can be paid or unpaid. I do not believe in unpaid internships, and I'll give one major reason is that if we want to teach students financial responsibility, they have to earn money. The second reason is going back to the equity again. A lot of students that can participate in an unpaid internship come from a more privileged background. And if we want to make sure that our most vulnerable students and students from disadvantaged communities are able to access these same opportunities, we need to pay them. And so I'll talk more about how the LEA and the SEA can lean in to make sure that those opportunities are there for students. And then the next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Sorry. On the bottom of that document, what you'll see, while all of that is happening, we had the tenacity employability skills class was going to develop those employability skills. And we also had practice, so those mock interviews as well. And something else I just want to reiterate, we had very strong advisory boards for our career education pathways. So we had the support of industry leaders that were able to provide these opportunities that you see here. Okay, next slide for real.
One thing I wanted to piggyback on that Najmah said was about the paid internship part too, because for some of our more vulnerable communities, the paid internship is important because again, on one of the slides I mentioned that it's a great opportunity to help propel our students' income levels, and that's important if we want to change our communities around for some of our students. So if they can start an internship making what people make when they're 18, 19 years old in 10th grade, they can make $5 more when they become 18, 19, or 20 years old. So that's a great opportunity for our students to actually start becoming more sustainable members of their community.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to highlight with this slide that, again, this is a systematic approach to making sure that every single student has the opportunity at post-secondary success. This is not something that just lives in one bucket or another. This is something that's written right now into at least 3 pieces of legislation, major pieces of legislation that have implications on not only career education with Perkins, but when you're thinking about OSSE, Every Student Succeeds Act, that covers every aspect almost of our public education system. And then with WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which has an impact on opportunity youth, on young adult learners, on disconnected youth as well. And so in each of those, I won't read through them, but you can take a look, there is a specific targeted and intentional requirement to include work-based learning, to use funds, to support work-based learning. That also means that there's an opportunity to be creative in blending and braiding these funding streams to meet the need of students. So when we're talking about how can we ensure that students get paid for these opportunities? Well, the funding is there. You just have to understand what the legislation says, and again, how you can creatively blend and braid these funds to get to where you need to be. Also looking at philanthropic dollars as well to see if there's some matching that could happen. But it definitely takes vision and being bold and thinking outside of the box in order to move this work forward.
All right, so moving to, we're going to step by step this. So we're going to start with the school level support for work-based learning. And again, I started as a college career coordinator at 2 schools, one in Prince George's County, Maryland, and moving forward into DC, where that was an integral part of my job and the experiences that our students participated in to make them successful for our programs. And so creating a work-based learning strategy at your school level is really, really important. It's not just the work that the LEA or the state agency does. The strategy actually begins at the school, and then everybody partners to work together to try to get the work done. And so first part of this is just looking at your curriculum and skills and standards. Again, your work-based learning experiences should align. I often find it very interesting when people plan work-based learning opportunities for the students, and it's great stuff. It's great opportunities, but I can't really align it to a skill. I don't know why we're going. And sometimes it makes the students not know why they're going to, or it's something that they'll learn later and the connection is not clear. Survey the students' interest is the next part. So I've definitely had grade levels of students where my seniors were very hands-on. They are not going to listen to a guest speaker. They're not probably going to do a webinar. But then my junior class, they were completely different. They were very much more the guest speakers, and they wanted to do certain things, but not necessarily very hands-on. They like to listen and talk. So survey your students' interests. See what kind of careers that they're interested in. What types of learning spaces do they like? What type of other things I used to try to gather data from the kids, like if we're doing an internship or an apprenticeship or different things like that, or job shadowing. Do you have transportation? What is your transportation space like? Are you allowed to ride the metro or take the bus to certain parts of town? Different things like that. So survey your students' interests, see who they are as you kind of create your work-based learning strategy. Then it's a lot of planning. I would definitely say that you need to plan 3 to 6 months out with work-based learning. And I know it's the middle of the school year for some people, but it's not too late. Hey, let's get started. Let's try to get us up to spring break with a work-based learning strategy or work-based learning plan. And then go ahead and try to get different types of work-based learning experiences started that are going to align to maybe the curriculum in the second term. Since we're, depending on when you started school, the first term might be about to end or midway through. Communicate with your advisory board if you have one, or establish one if you don't have one. And then look at grade level implementation. Every experience is not going to be for a 9th grader as it's going to be for a 12th grader and vice versa. That's something that I've also noticed that with different colleagues, that I was like, this was really a great trip for the 10th graders. This was not great for the seniors, and they didn't really like it. Or it was something too advanced for the 10th graders, and the seniors understood. So really kind of think about staggering your grade level experiences, and then really look at these, and so that you're not constantly repeating things. Now, if you go back to the same work-based learning space or opportunity, what is something else that you're going to learn? How are you going to stack it? How are you going to make it increase the rigor, different things like that? Not just going back to get an introductory lesson or opportunity to learn about cybersecurity from the same people at the same organization. Create documents and templates for your students and industry partners. These can be worksheets. If you kind of look over here on the picture I have a template that I used to send. We used to partner with Gaylord when I was the coordinator for our culinary program in Prince George's County. And I used to literally send this spreadsheet over to the Gaylord, and I had a contact there, and she would complete this spreadsheet with who would train. I would actually put the dates in. And if the dates didn't work, so these dates work for us. If the dates didn't work for them, we talked about it. If it snowed, like you see I have January dates there, those are, it snows here. So we sometimes have to change them, but we already have a commitment. So she would literally go in and just put the person who's going to do the training based on the topic and activity, the time, the location. We would kind of go back and forth between the two. And it was a great way, and then resources over here. It was a great way to have everybody on the same page about what we were doing. It was a already generated template. They could send this up to any other management level as well. I also had a presentation template that was already put together that I would send over if the person was doing a PowerPoint or something like that. I would also have them fill out a sheet where it would tell me any other additional resources that they needed to have and a few things about them. And I would just send over this template. They would complete it. They would send it back to me. For students, I had worksheets like work-based learning opportunities, especially when we had guest speakers, worksheets for something for them to do. It was like 3 questions. For those, especially for those students who are not sit and listen. I'm not very much of a sit and listen either. I need something to do as well. And so great opportunity for the kids to actually have something to do while they are listening to the guest speaker. And you can have additional templates depending on what type of work-based learning strategy you are using. There are some for site visits. There are worksheets for job shadowing experiences. There are, projects for those opportunities as well. Orientation. So I would say this much, that we have, and again, me and Najmah have worked real close, prior to her leaving DCPS with different employers. And, she talked about the employer experience. It is very important to kind of orientate your employers about that they're working with students. They're not with students every day. Definitely, not with people under 18. And therefore, sometimes their expectations are varied. Some people know that their kids are kids, and then some people have experiences where they're upset when they leave. So I would kind of say just have a mini orientation of some type with any employers that you're going to have. You can possibly do something like a conference call. If you get all your trainers lined up or your guest speakers for the year, you can do a conference call and say, hey, thanks for being a guest speaker this year. I just want to give you a few heads up about a few things. Different types, any questions answered, all those types of things to kind of get that out the way so it's not day of and there are surprises or that they might not be a best fit for your classroom. I would also do kind of the same thing with the students, but ahead of time when they're actually going to go out on a site visit. Often we, before we left the school, I always tell the students where we're going, what are we doing, what is the purpose of this opportunity, what I expected them, what did they expect to learn, those different things like that. So it would not be, again, I'm just hopping on the bus to go somewhere for the day. Think about policy and procedures too. What is the procedure when you're on a site visit for students? Employers, how do they need to engage? Think about background checks, all these different things that may, make this a great opportunity or not. Evaluation. Evaluation reflection, like Najmah had mentioned prior to, is important. Make sure our students get opportunity to voice what they did or didn't like about something. The employers the same. And then so you'll know what works and you can continue to make this space better, because again, this is a ongoing experience. It's not one-off opportunities. And then just be consistent, because consistency is key when implementing a work-based learning strategy with your students and your employers. Don't, make sure you're responsive to emails for your employers. Make sure that you have your dates in line, because some people have to take off well in advance to do these things, whereas some employers give you 40 hours of community service for the year for you to do. So just, be mindful of that. And I am done with that. We're going to move on to local and state agency support of work-based learning.
All right, we can go to the next slide. Now, I'll go through this somewhat quickly because I definitely want to get to the measuring work-based learning, which I think is critical in the next phase of what states really need to do to strengthen their work-based learning offerings. But wanted to get the perspective from working at DC Public Schools, which is the local education agency here. We're hybrid a bit because we're not a state, but we are. But then also from my perspective and my role at the Council of Chief State School Officers, I lead our New Skills for Youth initiative, which works with 10 states who receive funding through JP Morgan Chase. And then last year, we started our Career Readiness Collaborative, which we support state education agencies to go further and faster with their career readiness efforts. And so last year that was 8 states. This year we've grown to 16 states that will be a part of our Career Readiness Collaborative. And what we really want for LEAs and SEAs to understand is what is their role in this, to make sure that we are supporting schools in the best way possible. So number one, again, that vision and goal setting, and it always, to me, like I said, goes back to equity. You have to understand and make sure that you are articulating well what it is that you want to achieve down to the school level, so that students across schools within a district or across districts within a state are receiving similar services and opportunities, regardless of what zip code or circumstances that they were born into. So that is critical from the local level and the state level, to make sure that they're looking at the requirements when they're writing their Perkins plans, which has been up for reauthorization, and states are in that stage now where they're doing those local needs assessments. So making sure that LEAs, that you all are a part of those discussions, and reaching out to your state CTE director if you haven't already, and if you're not involved, to make sure that that local perspective is being heard as they're right now, like I said, in those stages of doing those local needs assessments in the next few months as they move into finalizing those plans. The second area where I really see value in leadership from the local and state education agencies are around employer engagement. At the state level, understanding what are the top industry needs and pathways in the state, so manufacturing, IT, health sciences, et cetera, and how can you at the state level, looking at governor's workforce boards, how can you at the state level bring on those employer champions who are interested in those new collar jobs, not necessarily, students not necessarily having to go just the 2-year or 4-year college route, but those employers that are open to students going directly into employment because they had those work-based learning experiences where they were able to get certifications in high school, and making sure that employers know that and developing those pipelines. That's at the state level. And then making sure that that translates to the local level, those local industries that are available, having those, I know here in DC, we partner with the Department of Small and Local Businesses. I may have messed that acronym up, but we partnered with them because, to Candice's point, this is also about revitalizing neighborhoods. And so seeing what are the opportunities there where students can work and support and learn with those small businesses too. But that's where students can, the LEA and SEAs can take charge and lead in supporting schools to free them up to do the actual work and recruiting and supporting that employer engagement. The funding, which I've talked about, critical. Something else that we were able to do, look at your state, look at your locality, your district, and see, are there already youth employment programs? In DC, yes, we have the summer youth employment program. And so it made no sense to me why we weren't partnering with them. They already had the infrastructure around recruiting employers. They had the funds to pay the students for the internships. We ended up getting some matching dollars through our Perkins funding and some other philanthropic dollars to pay students at a higher rate because they had gone through our employability skills training. So I think students going straight through the mayor's summer youth employment program made like $7 an hour, but because they went through our employability skills training, they were able to make $10 an hour. So really incentivizing learning and taking work-based learning to the next level. That is something that, like I said, LEAs and SEAs need to lead the charge on that, but also doing it in a way that they're breaking down silos and partnering with existing programs. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel, and then you're not competing with each other for the same students and the same employers. Next that I put on here, teacher and staff training. We trained all of the teachers that were teaching tenacity, had to go through training. It evolved, it got better as we learned. We did observations within the classrooms with the teachers to see how they could maybe, how the curriculum, whether or not it was being responsive or not. So as I was at DCPS, we had 2 editions of tenacity. The one that I put in the chat box is the 3rd edition that I started before I left. And like I said, I'm glad to see that it's grown in the way that it has. But that is something where, especially the LEAs, need to support schools and making sure that what is intended through the curriculum is actually happening, because I also believe in do no harm. And sometimes if it's not being delivered with fidelity, and we're telling students the wrong thing, then you can actually do harm to their career pathway trajectory. So definitely wanting to make sure that that constant evaluation, checking in to make sure that is being delivered with fidelity is critical. And then 2, I saw the question in the chat box from Steve about sometimes employers, they do have concerns, particularly if you have students in engineering or construction pathways, with liability issues and not wanting to hire students that are under 18. There are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, as I said, if you're partnering with an ongoing summer youth employment program, they have partnerships and agreement, and usually the state or the city takes on that liability. With DC Public Schools, when employers would sign up, there was a disclaimer there where they can sign off. It's an established program. It's already there. It's not just something new that's springing up. Another option, though, which we've seen success in Ohio, for example, they have partnered with an organization called ADECO, which is a work-based learning intermediary, and they serve as the kind of body for any liability. So that takes that off of the plate of the employer, and you can go through that system. So there are a number of different options, but I highly recommend looking up work-based learning intermediaries in your area. And again, ADECO, ADECCO. They are nationwide. There are a number of them, but that is one example of an intermediary that you could work with. If we go to the next slide. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. There we go.
I hear it thinking. Okay. So finally, like I said, measuring work-based learning is critical. It's hard, but it is required now as well, as we're talking about CTE and Perkins and that legislation. It is required that there is some measure within the accountability system to measure secondary career and technical education program quality. And so there are 3 different ways that you can do that. One is through the percentage of concentrators that are graduating from high school, having attained a recognized post-secondary credential. One way is to measure the percentage of CTE concentrators that are graduating from high school and having attained post-secondary credits in a relevant CTE program or program of study, so through dual enrollment or credit transfer agreements. And then finally, one way to measure it is the percentage of CTE concentrators graduating from high school having participated in work-based learning. Number one, going back to how Candice started us off, you have to adhere to the definition of work-based learning. Sometimes people will try to get by with, well, my student worked at McDonald's, so that's an internship and that's work-based learning. Unfortunately, it is not. As I said, unless they are doing some type of entrepreneurship track at McDonald's where they're learning also about franchising and management, which I think would actually be a pretty cool internship idea. It has to be tied back to the curriculum, right? So it has to have those components that she laid out in order for it to be a true work-based learning experience. And the way, I just want to give you all a couple of examples, and I'll stop talking and open it up for questions in a second. But the way that we've seen states do this, the most effective way that I've seen this be measured is through creating a work-based learning course, where you can have all of the components that we've talked about, all of those, I don't remember how many, 12 or types of work-based learning that Candice mentioned before, having a work-based learning course, because you can see very easily who has enrolled. It's tied to a course code, and you can very easily pull that data. There are a number of other ways to get there, but I think that that's the cleanest, the easiest, and where you get the most true information. Other ways that states go about measuring it, it could be collected through a statewide student information system, but then that gets into student data and having to be careful about PII and how you store that information to be collected locally or collected through a locally sourced student information system or through a separate Perkins data collection when you're doing that reporting. And then collected by individuals or institutions through surveys, which I would, again, that wouldn't be my first recommendation because there's so much more room for human error to record which students went to which work-based learning opportunities, what was the duration of that opportunity. Again, if you have the course, that information is already baked into the measurement. But I would highly, highly suggest that when you are thinking about setting up these work-based learning programs, start with, before you do anything else, start with how am I going to measure this to make sure that students have access. How am I going to break down across demographics to make sure that students with disabilities are getting the access that they need, that women learners are in construction work-based learning, that students of color are in those, high academic health sciences, engineering pathways, and that every student is getting what they need. So I will stop now. I know that was a lot of information, and just open it up for any last questions that you all may have.
And I'm trying to find the chat. And see, Najmah is the only person that can see the questions. I can't see them because I'm sharing the screen.
I know I'm scrolling. So I spoke a bit. I saw the question about the apprenticeship sometimes being an issue. Let me see, what else do we have in the box? Okay, thank you for that resource, Megan. Definitely, everyone, make sure you look at the resources in the chat box. And feel free to take yourself off mute. You can directly ask the question or type a question in the box. I see someone asked a question earlier about transportation. I'm trying to scroll back up. There it goes again. So thank you, Diane. How have you handled transportation for students? So again, partnering with the Summer Youth Employment Program has been great. They have the funding from the city level to provide each student with a Metro card, so they're able to go to their internship at least for the first couple of weeks before they get paid. That's also why I believe in paid internships. So then students have to learn how to budget their money so they can get back and forth to work. Another option, if you're having work-based learning experiences during the day, using funding from your local dollars, looking at Perkins and the allowabilities there for field trips and buses to take students to those work-based learning opportunities as a group. I think that group learning is great. And then again, like I said, you can take a bus and you can take multiple students at once. So we were able to do that and use those funds to secure buses for, those off-site work-based learning opportunities. Something else that's really interesting, and especially for those older learners, maybe seniors that you have, I've seen some states, they've been partnering with companies such as Lyft, who have a kind of corporate social responsibility arm, and something that they've been piloting, I think, in Detroit and a couple of other cities, is providing free transportation, free shared rides to work into internships. So like I said, thinking outside of the box, getting creative, seeing what companies and organizations are doing. Again, it was Lyft, and they're in Detroit right now doing that work. And I know a couple of other states, I think, or cities, I think maybe Oakland too, where students are able to use their ride share services to get to work.
I have another couple of thoughts too. I know that when I was in Tennessee, I worked in an early childhood program, and they actually, a church that was in the neighborhood had a bus, and they would take the kids over to the daycare site for them. Because they had the insurance, they had the bus, the capacity, and so they would just do that, and that was it actually worked out pretty well. Also, I worked at a school that had a special ed program where they took the special education students to work, but the bus was never full. And so I had also had, like, they would drop the kids off on the route, or some of the kids had jobs where those kids worked. And so it was kind of and I talked with the special ed, coordinator and stuff, just to make sure we weren't infringing upon anything. And she's, they said it was fine. So that actually ended up being a great partnership. And we also had a couple of special education students. So it, within that space too. So those were two additional ways. And often too, depending on where you live and the size of the organizations, we've just simply asked for a bus. And they asked us how much it costs. And we simply give it once and they pay it. And we definitely, when I was in my prior position, we definitely would have 2 or 3 buses paid for by a company, every year.
And I just posted the link to Lyft there too. So definitely check that out and the work that they're doing in different communities. I think we're at time. I could talk. You can tell we can both talk about this all day, but I know we have other things to do. So I don't know, Megan, if you wanted to wrap it up or.
Yep. Thank you both so much for that important and amazing, awesome presentation. It was so informative. We really appreciate it. And I just want to remind all educators in action that this presentation will be posted on the Educators in Action website, and I'll share the link in the next day or two. And I'll also be sharing the invite for the Educators in Action reception at Vision on December 4th. So look for those items. And lastly, a final reminder that our next virtual discussion will be on October 24th, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we hope you all can join. Thank you again to both of you. We really enjoyed having you here today. I hope everyone has.
Really, I shot my email in the chat box, so if you have any questions or follow up, feel free to shoot me an email.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.